This is the AlgoLaser DIY Kit MK2 10-watt diode laser engraver and cutter. As the name suggests, this laser is at the entry level of laser engravers and is particularly suited to those people who like to put kits together. It's a DIY laser, but as you'll see in this review, it's really simple to put together and you can be up and running very quickly. Now, I've worked on projects before where I've had to outsource laser work using much larger machines, but using a desktop laser like this one is new to me, so if it's new to you and you're thinking about jumping into the world of lasers, then my experience might be helpful for you. I'll be looking at the onboard AlgoOS, the mobile app, and how the laser works with Lightburn. Now, I won't go through all the details because the review would be super long, but I'll cover things that will be helpful for you to decide if this laser might be, well, the right laser for you. So if you want to skip ahead, then you can use the chapter markers in the description. AlgoLaser did send me this laser to review, and I do get to keep it, but they didn't have any say in how I tested it. They just want my honest opinion. They also provided me with this air assist unit and this honeycomb platform. Now, they're sold as optional extras, although I would say, yeah, they're essential, so you need to factor that in. Right up front, I'll say that you can achieve a lot with this laser when it comes to engraving. Now, as a diode laser, it does have some limitations, so you need to check exactly what you're trying to engrave or cut and how quickly you want to do that. And I've done heaps of test cuts and engraves. This is just a small sample of them. Yeah, there's a whole, there's a whole stack of them. And I've done that to really try and get to know this laser over the last couple of weeks, and I've really enjoyed using it. There are some things about the laser which I found less useful, not bad in any way, but just less useful, and we will get into those shortly. I won't go into too much detail about how the laser is assembled. If you're watching this video because you like the idea of a more affordable kit-style laser, and you like to put kits together, then you'll find this process very simple. The supplied instructions are actually very easy to follow. The parts are all clearly labeled, and the bolts, screws, and tools provided all make sense. Like I said, this is a DIY kit laser, and if you like making kits, this will be very simple. Even if this is your first ever kit, I think you'll probably find this easy to assemble. The 4 rail sections go together very easily, and if you look carefully at the actual parts, the build quality, yeah, it's very good. The finish on these parts is excellent, and overall, as far as kits go, I think there's a lot to like. Then it's as simple as plugging in the power and connecting to your Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi connection was very straightforward. It found my network in seconds and accepted my password and connected quickly. You'll need Wi-Fi for things like firmware updates and using the mobile app. Just a couple of things to be mindful of when you're putting this together. Make sure you get the belt tension right. Otherwise, the laser won't be accurate in the way that it engraves, particularly with complex shapes and curves. And also pay attention to the direction of this limit switch. I had this one round the wrong way at first, so yeah, had to fix that. And you might need to make some adjustments to how the air hose from the air assist connects to this main cable here. You just want to make sure that there's no tangling happening here, and that can take a bit of fiddling around to get that right. I also want to talk about safety right up front. This is an open air laser. It doesn't come with an enclosure, which means that the laser and the reflections can pose a risk to your eyes and to anybody else's eyes, and even your pets. And it also means that you're exposed to the smoke and fumes that are caused by the engraving and cutting. Now, I'll be demonstrating some functionality out here on the bench because it's easy to film, but all the engraving and cutting happened in the enclosure that I built, which is just sitting over there. And I was happy to build my own enclosure because I had the materials on hand to build it with. And I guess it's all in the line of that DIY theme. But AlgoLaser does make an enclosure for this machine, and I do recommend that you check that out if you can't build your own. It looks really well made and offers some good extra safety features, and a camera. That could be very useful. These glasses also come with the kit. Now, they weren't labeled in any way, which did cause me some concern, and they also didn't fit very well over my glasses. So I actually bought these ones here, which are specifically labeled for the wavelength of this laser, and they fit better over my glasses. So link in the description below. So the unique selling point about this laser, apart from the price, is that it has an onboard OS. And that means you've got things like engraving, cutting, motion controls, firmware updates, all available on the machine itself without needing to use a computer. And that was really useful because the first thing I did was a firmware update entirely from the laser itself. So no physical connection to a computer. The inputs on the side allow you to plug in a USB drive so that you can access files directly. And there's also an input for a Smart Air Assist module and a USB-C port to connect your own computer for using software like Lightburn. Plus, there's also some onboard storage which you can access by transferring files from your computer. Now, to get familiar with how the laser moves around, you can access the motion control and then move the laser around in various distance increments. Now look, I found that very useful for checking to see that the cables and the air hose were all moving around okay without getting tangled. And also just to get used to the full range of motion of the laser. I actually found to have those controls on board very useful. Now let's get to the engraving. I've done a bunch of tests on a range of materials that I had on hand, and also some special laser ply, which I purchased for this review so that I could get to know this laser. So let's just switch the camera angles here a bit so that I can do these next demos in a bit more of a real-time fashion. In this example, I'm going to do a simple engrave and cut from USB drive. Now, I have actually already done it because I wanted to do that prior to filming this because of the smoke and the exposure to the laser light, which I wanted to avoid. All the other engravings and cuttings that you've seen in this video are done in my enclosure over there, but this one I've just done so that it's easier to film. So, first of all, just plug that into the side, then choose Projects, then select the USB disk. I've got one test image that I've loaded in there, and that's the Greyhound head. Then choose Engraving. Then I'm going to choose my material. Now it's defaulting to bass plywood, and that just happens to be what I'm using, so I'll select that. Then it will give me some auto parameters to choose. I'll choose those ones there because that looks pretty good, and then confirm. Now I want to engrave but also cut, so I can choose this option here. I can use a circular border or a square or a hexagon or a triangle. I'm going to stay with circular. Now the important thing here is that I need to select the material thickness. And because I'm using 3mm, I'm actually going to select 4mm as the cutting thickness because I have found that it's better to overestimate that. And we'll see how that turns out in just a moment. And then I'll confirm that. There are a few other settings that I can choose as well. Things like the quality, I'll make sure that's set to the highest, which it already is. And then it's just a matter of pressing processing. Now we get the image loading into our work area, and if I now tap that and move that around, you'll notice that the laser starts to move. And the laser's just moving to the start point, which is kind of cool. It's all happening in real time. So if I change the size using this slider, the image will change the size on the screen. And then I can just keep moving that around. And this is a very handy feature. Now I can also, if I want to, change the size specifically using these options here to change the dimensions. And if I confirm that, you'll see that the image size changes. Then I can hit the frame button, which will give me a preview of where it's actually going to do the engraving and cutting. Then it's just a matter of hitting start. I'm not going to do that now because I've already done the job. So let's see how that turned out. As I've said, it does help to overestimate the thickness of material. And as you can see, I probably should have chosen 5mm. It does come out. I have had much more successful cuts than this. It does come out, but that's the result that you get. Yeah, so it does work. Maybe if I'd chosen 5mm or 6mm as the material thickness, as in overcompensated for the thickness, maybe it would have worked a little bit better. But there you go. There's a real-life demonstration, something to experiment with for further tests. But you'll see when we start using Lightburn that it's much easier to get the control that you're looking for much faster. Using the laser with the mobile app is also quite simple. Once you've got all your network connections set up, it's just a matter of refreshing the available lasers, and you can see that the laser immediately goes into being controlled by a mobile connection mode. When you've got the app set up in simple mode and you tap on engraving, you get presented with a range of options, which gives you a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. So first of all, let's go back to the test image and have a look at the photo album there. You can see that I've got a few images here which I've permitted AlgoLaser to see from my photo album. So I'll go back to the sample image. Then I can choose some features here to adjust the contrast, the brightness, things like that. And then I can also crop the image if I wanted to, but I'll cancel that. That looks pretty good. And I can also apply some filters. I think it's actually looking pretty good the way it is. And then just simply tap next. And once again, we come back to a similar interface where I can change the size and then move the image around in the work area. You'll notice though that the laser isn't actually moving now. For that to happen, I need to press the frame button, and you can see that the laser will now start to move to the space where it's actually going to do its engraving. It's pretty straightforward. Then I can also choose some advanced options to configure exactly how the engraving is going to take place, whether it's going to be dot matrix or whether it's going to be a scan or whether it's actually a vector image. I can choose quality settings quite easily. I'll leave that on highest. And then I can choose the direction of the laser, whether it's going to go horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. And then I can also choose the laser power by sliding that up and down. I can choose the speed and the number of passes. Once I've got all those sorted out, I can then press start. The mobile app will then start to upload that information to the laser. Now, I'm not actually going to press start because I'm out in the open here and I would normally do this in my enclosure. And I've already filmed one example which is out in the open like this. But this is just an example as to how quickly you can get an image from your phone into the app and then out onto the laser. Let's have a look at another example. Another simple example from the app is that you could engrave something like a QR code. So if I scroll down, you'll see there's the option there to do a QR code. Now I've got a number of options down the bottom as to what I would like to link that QR code to, but I'm going to just leave it as a very simple link option here. And I've got my link all queued up and ready to go. This one happens to be to my YouTube channel. Let's see whether that works. And then hit done, and then hit next. I might make that a little bit smaller and then move that around in my work area. And then I'll hit frame just to see whether that's going to engrave in the space where I want it to engrave. I'm just doing this as an example. That looks pretty good. And then I would hit start. And once again, it uploads that information to the laser, and then I get presented with the start interface. And there you can see I've got the start interface. From there I can press start and the engraving takes place. Now, what does that actually look like and does it work? Well, I'm glad you asked. I've actually got it lying down here on the bed underneath. There it is. That was my test print. And okay, so this is just only on a piece of test material, but that's what the QR code looks like. And if you were to scan that now, that would actually take you to my YouTube channel page. So there you go. So QR codes and images, yeah, they're pretty simple to do from the mobile app. Another feature you might like to try from the mobile app is the puzzle feature. If I tap on puzzle, I can enter in the number of rows and columns, which tells me how many pieces in the puzzle there are. Then you can add a background image. Let's go back to our test image, then tap next. We go straight to the interface for actually doing the engraving. I can change the size and then move that around on my work area, then hit frame. Make sure that that's actually going to engrave in the right space. And if that looks okay, then tap start. So then the mobile app uploads all that information into the laser. And then we see the start interface. Now it's just a matter of tapping start and away it goes. Now, once again, I'm not going to do that because the laser is out in the open, but I have done it a couple of times. I've got these ones here, and you can see that the image engraves beautifully in both of these. Something that I did have a little bit of trouble with though was actually getting the cut settings right. Now I also tried it on this one here. I tried a couple of different variations of this. Again, the image engraves really nicely and the pieces also appear to want to cut correctly, but there's something that I just couldn't get happening in terms of the cut setting. I did ask AlgoLaser about that and they did give me some things to try, but I found that I actually had more success by just using a puzzle generator online and then importing that into Lightburn and doing the same thing. And that actually gave me a puzzle with pieces that came apart much more easily. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't work, it's just that it didn't work so well for me, and because I was already interested in Lightburn, I thought, look, I'm just going to do this in Lightburn. But the feature is there for you to explore if you want to. Now, if you want more control, or if you're looking to do detailed work and get the most out of your laser, then you really do need to use something like Lightburn. The AlgoLaser installs seamlessly with Lightburn, and I had no issue at all getting this set up using the Find Laser function within Lightburn. Coming back to my first test image here of the Greyhound, I've set this up in 3 simple layers, one for the engraved line, one for the image, and then one for the cut. Now this is where I wished AlgoLaser had actually sent me the smart air assist, because then I would have been able to turn the air on and off within Lightburn to help with the final cut. But that's okay. The way I got around that is to run the first 2 layers with very low air assist, and then run the last layer separately with air assist turned up to maximum. Now I ran some cutting tests to see whether the settings on the AlgoLaser website matched the material I was using, and I found that those settings were generally correct, but I also did reduce the speed for the cutting layer to ensure that the shapes were fully cut out for larger or longer circular cuts, or just longer lines. Now, if you're doing small test cuts like this, you can use higher speeds, but I found that for longer lines, or as I said, these longer circular lines, I needed to slow things down a bit. But the overall result is really good, and I've had great fun experimenting with this image. Now, you'll notice that I've also been experimenting with clear finishes as well, and I've learned a bunch of stuff about that, like actually being able to engrave through a clear finish without any problems. I also found that using this laser together with Lightburn made me want to experiment more quickly with other designs, and that's where I started to work with a box maker that I found online to make this simple lampshade. Now, the box maker will give you a basic outline of the box, which I then imported into Shaper 3D to make some modifications. The box maker will give you an outline that places the base at the bottom of these sides, as you would expect a box to be, but I wanted the base to be 32mm up from the bottom of the side to conceal the light fitting and make it look like a lampshade rather than just a box sitting on a lamp base. I then used Lightburn to place this pattern into the cutouts. And I should point out that I designed this shape in Shaper 3D and then exported it as a DXF so that I could experiment with it in Lightburn for this design and other designs. Now, to make the parts click together nicely, I experimented with the kerf offset by running several small cuts and then picking the offset that would allow a snug fit. An offset of 0.08mm works, but I might experiment with that a little bit more because I'd like to make these pre-finished, that is with a clear finish on them, and the addition of a clear finish will actually affect the fit. But hey, getting that to work, that's the fun part, right? Then I just started looking around at other things that I could engrave. And we had this old wooden box in the house, and actually we were about to just throw it out. But then I got this idea for engraving the top so that it could have another life. I got these corner designs from Creative Fabrica and then simply added this line of text in the middle. Then using Lightburn, I was able to accurately align the lid of the box under the laser and then engrave the pattern. Even with very little experience with this laser, this worked first time. I think it looks great. But what about acrylic? Being a diode laser, it has limited capability with acrylic, and you do get a sample piece of black in the box. And I used this to cut up my logo a few times, which seemed to work okay. I also picked up this larger sheet from a local plastics supplier and tried a few more experiments. Using Lightburn, I went back to my test image and got really good results. This Greyhound file has nice detail. Experimenting with the fill and offset fill functions in Lightburn also gave me some interesting effects in how my logo was engraved. And using the offset fill gave it a more three-dimensional look, whereas the fill option made it, well, flatter or matte. Either way, I quite like them both. And the edge cut is super smooth. And that was using the settings provided directly from the AlgoLaser website. So those settings checked out absolutely. Now, one thing I need to point out is that cutting or engraving acrylic creates, nasty fumes, and you really do need extraction or some kind of filtration to deal with that. The fumes are also quite heavy. They tend to hang around and kind of sink into the lower spaces in your workshop or your work area. So extraction really is a must. And make sure that if you're venting this outside your workshop, that you're not just venting it straight into your neighbor's yard. That's probably not going to be so great. And I think that's why I'm favoring working with this laser ply, as it's been made specifically for laser engraving and cutting using formaldehyde-free adhesives. Then you're mainly dealing with wood smoke, which is much easier to handle and much less offensive. There's nothing really that I don't like about this laser in terms of functionality, although I would say that I moved on fairly quickly from the onboard OS to Lightburn, and I think that's mostly because I like the interface of looking at a computer screen and having greater flexibility and control over what I'm working on. Now, I can see a use for the onboard OS if you have simpler jobs that you can control from, say, a file on a USB, or if you wanted to batch a job from a local file and you didn't want to have your computer always connected, or if you don't have a laptop handy or something like that. And having simple onboard controls for moving the laser around and testing it or doing firmware upgrades is very useful. So who might be interested in this laser? Well, as a kit laser, it's right at the entry level and quite affordable. But like I said, as an open laser without an enclosure, it does pose some risks which you should account for. But they can all be solved with an enclosure and extraction or some kind of an air filter. And it's worth checking those options out on the AlgoLaser website. And if you can solve those issues, then this laser is a good introduction into laser engraving and cutting of materials suited to a laser of this type, that is, a diode laser at a power of 10 watts. Now, you can get larger machines, of course, but then the price goes up, as you'd expect. And you should also consider the initial upfront cost when taking into account the honeycomb platform, the air assist, and potentially the enclosure, and a different set of protective glasses. Now, having said all of that though, I've really enjoyed getting to know this laser, and it's encouraged me to check out other aspects of working with engraved products, like getting the surface finish just right with a good clear finish. And I look forward to seeing where this can take me in exploring more designs. This channel is all about designing and making, so having this capability is kind of what this workshop is all about. Now, there's been a lot to get through in this video, and I really appreciate you watching, especially if you've made it this far. So if you've got value out of this, then I'd love it if you could hit that like button, leave a comment, and consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.